Hi everybody, welcome back to the Pinovate YouTube channel. I'm Lena, and today we are going to be making our furry friends animal little picnic table. This is a really fun craft. You get to build everything completely from scratch, and then we get to decorate it together with some fun little table settings. So let's get started. So first things first, we're gonna go through what comes in your kit. So we have some things to embellish the table and to decorate afterwards. So that includes vinyl stickers, some wood pieces for the table setting, a tiny little vase with some flowers and a tablecloth. And then you'll also have some E6000 super glue. There's 21 wood pieces that are all labeled and numbered, so you know exactly which piece is which. We also have 2 different sizes of nails. So your white nails will be the larger nails, and then you have some smaller finishing nails for some thinner pieces of wood. We also have sandpaper to sand down our pieces, as well as 2 sponge brushes and a jar of outdoor paint. On top of that, you're gonna wanna grab a hammer, a pencil, and a ruler. So for the first few steps, I've set aside all of my embellishments. We won't need those till later. And I have all of my pieces laid out with the labels facing me. On your little sheet, there is a diagram that also has the pieces laid out and numbered so you know which piece is which. But firstly, I'm going to have to remove all of the labels here. So that's why it's kind of important that you keep your sheet nearby so that you still know which piece is which. So now that I have all of the labels off of my pieces and they're still nice and organized, I'm just gonna take my sandpaper and I'm gonna sand every single piece down, and I wanna do it on all the sides and all of the edges. Okay, now that everything is sanded and it's nice, soft to the touch, there's no slivers or splinters sticking out of any of the edges. What you wanna do to prep for painting is get rid of all of the dust. So take an old rag or some paper towel and just make sure all of the dust is wiped off of your pieces and also wiped off of your workspace. So now my workspace and all of my pieces are free from the dust, so we are ready to paint. But first, I wanna make sure that all of my pieces are still organized in their categories because we did take off the stickers. So this is a good time for you to refer back to your diagram and make sure you're painting all of the same pieces together so that they don't get messed up. So all of these pieces right here are my number 4 pieces. So I'm gonna paint these first before moving on to my other pieces. So I'm just gonna open up my jar of paint. And I'm gonna use my sponge brushes, and you don't want a whole lot of paint on your brush. So when you dip it in, you can use the side of the jar to take off the extra paint so it's not too much on your sponge. And you want a nice, flat, thin layer of paint. You don't want this to be too thick so that it dries nice and flat and smooth. And I'm gonna paint all of the edges, both sides, and as well as the thin little sides so that the entire piece of wood is covered. And I'm gonna do 2 thin coats. So once I do one side, I can move on to my next piece while that side dries, and so on and so forth. So I did a thin coat on these first few pieces, and I just wanted to stop and show you that you can still see some of the wood grain through that thin first coat. So if you like the look of that, you can stop there and you don't have to do a second coat, and you'll just be able to see a bit of that wood grain peeking through your white paint. Okay, so now I have all of my pieces painted, and you can see they're painted front and back and all of the sides and little edges. So you wanna wait until they're completely dry to the touch before you begin your assembly process. Okay, so the first thing we're going to assemble now that all of our pieces are nice and dry to the touch is the sign. And for that, you're going to need your number 6 piece, your number 7 piece, and then your 3 number 8 pieces. And you're also going to need the smaller size nails and of course, your hammer. So the first thing I'm going to do is just lay out my 3 number 8 pieces where I want them on my number 6 piece. So these are the parts of the sign that actually have the words. You can make them perfectly straight if you'd like. I actually prefer it when they're a little bit crooked. I think it looks a bit more fun, a bit more interesting. And then for your number 7 piece, this actually goes all the way to the bottom, and you want to make sure it's completely lined up with all of the edges of the number 6 piece. So it shouldn't be hanging off the side at all. It should fit perfectly at the bottom. So now that I know exactly how I want my pieces to fit and how I want them angled on my sign, what I'm actually going to do is flip it over from the back. So we're going to be nailing from the back. And I'm going to be using the smaller size nails, so they're the silver ones in the little bag. And you just want to have it lined up as best you can. If you want to measure, if you want to be super precise, you can use a ruler to measure that. I'm just gonna eyeball it, make sure everything's straight and lined up. And you wanna make sure when you're nailing, it's going through both pieces of wood. So I'm gonna have it dead center in the back. I'm gonna take my hammer and I'm just gonna nail it all the way in. Just like that. So now that first piece is perfectly attached. And you're gonna do the same thing for the rest of the pieces, moving all the way down until you get to your number 7 piece at the bottom. And so now that I have my 3 number 8 pieces nailed from the back, I can flip it over. Make sure my number 5 piece is nice and aligned, and I'm going to nail in my number 5 piece from the front. Again, I'm just gonna use one of my tiny little nails for this. And so now our sign is assembled, and we can just leave this off to the side for when we need to attach it to our table. So the next part of the table we're going to be assembling is the tabletop. So for this, you're going to need 3 number 4 pieces, your number 5 piece, and we're still using the small nails. And of course, you still need your hammer. So the first thing you want to do to set up your tabletop is to line up all of your number 4 pieces perfectly. So they shouldn't be staggered. They should have a nice straight edge on the top and a nice straight edge on the bottom. And the next thing you want to do is you're going to take your number 5 piece and lay that in the center. And so there should be a little bit of the number 5 piece going over every single number 4 piece. So it's not all just on one side or just on the other side. It's nice and in the center like that. And this is going to be the bottom of the table. You're not going to be able to see it when your project is complete, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but you just want to make sure that there is wood going all the way across each of the 3 pieces. And again, I am just going to take my small nail and nail it in, making sure that it goes through all of the wood. And in between nailing, if you have to readjust and squeeze your 3 pieces back together, go ahead and do so. And that is our finished tabletop. So it should be staying together nice and snug, but if you want to have extra stability, you could also add nails the top of the table going into the bottom. So you just flip it over and add your 3 nails on the other side as well. So for the next part, we are now moving on to assembling the table legs. So for each side of the table, you are going to need 2 number 2 pieces, a number 3 piece, and a number 1 piece. You're also going to need a ruler or measuring tape and a pencil. And now we're using our larger sized white nails that come in this little baggie. And of course, we still need our hammer. So the first thing I am going to do is I'm actually going to set the number 1 and the number 3 piece aside, and I am going to line up my number 2 pieces so that the top creates a straight, flat line. So I don't want them lined up like this where the top is angled in any sort of way. I want to make sure the top part is nice and flat, and then same with the bottom. The bottom will be nice and flat as well, but there is space between them, whereas the top, both pieces are perfectly touching each other. And when I have them lined up like that, I'm going to take my ruler or my measuring tape, and I want to measure about 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom. And I'm just going to make a mark with my pencil. I'm going to do that on both sides. So it's 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom, and then I am just going to draw a straight line through that measurement. And that'll act as a guide for our next step. Perfect. So now that I have my measurement drawn on, I'm going to bring back my number 3 piece and I'm gonna place it towards the top. So now the top edges of my number 2 pieces and my number 3 pieces are perfectly aligned. So there's gonna be a little bit of overhang. The number 3 piece is gonna go a bit over the edges of the number 2 pieces on both sides, and that's perfectly fine. But you wanna make sure that the top edges are perfectly aligned with each other, and the number 3 piece isn't going too far out or too far down. And now I'm gonna take 2 of my larger size nails, and I'm going to nail my number 3 piece in place. After I have my first piece nailed into place, I'm gonna make sure my second piece is still lined up and adjusted exactly where I need it to be, because sometimes it gets knocked out of place when you're nailing. And then I can nail the second side in. So for extra stability, I'm going to turn this around and I'm gonna add 2 more nails going in from the other direction. So that is my number 3 piece, perfectly attached, going from both directions. So the last step to finishing off our table leg is to take our number 1 piece, and where we have our measurement from that line that we drew earlier, that is where our number 1 piece is going to sit. So I have it sitting right on the line, and I can cover my line a little bit just so that it doesn't show through. You can't see the pencil marks, and then I don't have to worry about erasing them. And I'm gonna take more of my white nails and hammer in this piece. If you'd like, I like to grab a ruler just to measure so that I know that it's even on both sides. It's about a little bit over 1.5 inches. That should be the overhang. And that's how you know it's pretty well centered on your number 2 pieces. Perfect. And like I did with the number 3 piece, I'm just gonna flip this over and add 2 more nails going in from the other side for some extra stability. And that is our table leg all complete. So you're going to repeat these steps 1 more time to assemble another table leg exactly like this one. So off camera, I went ahead and I assembled the second set of table legs. So you should have 2 that are exactly alike. And then we're also going to need to grab our tabletop that we had just assembled, and we are going to start putting our table together. So for this next step, we are assembling our table and we're putting our tabletop, attaching it to our table legs. For this step, you will probably need an extra set of hands. I have Miss Chrissy here helping me out. So I am going to prop up my table legs and I'm going to have them sit as if my tabletop was already attached. So they're perfectly aligned on both sides, making sure I'm holding them nice and straight. And then Chrissy's gonna help me by nailing in our tabletop. And so 1 nail is going to go on each plank of wood on both sides. So you should be using 6 nails total, and these are the larger size nails. So now your table will sit up all on its own. The next step is going to be attaching the bench. So you have 4 number 4 pieces left, and these are the pieces that we're going to use to create our bench. So you're going to use 2 for each side of the table. And on top of that little one, or those little number 1 pieces that are hanging off the sides, you're just going to place your 2 bench pieces and line them up to make them as straight as you can. And once they're all lined up, I like to just take my pencil, I'll take off the first piece, or the piece that's on the edge, and I will just make a little mark, just so that I know where that one goes. And I'll mark it on both sides. And I am just going to start by nailing 1 piece in at a time. So we're using the larger size nails again for this one. You You want to be extra careful with the placement of your nails for this part because our number 1 piece isn't very wide, and you want to make sure that the nail is going in through the number 4 piece that you're laying down all the way into the number 1 piece. So you want to make sure that you're not nailing too far out into the center of the bench where it misses that number 1 piece. So I have the first plank of each side set into the bench, and I just wanted to show you a little trick for the other 2 pieces. So you don't have a whole lot of space left on your number 1 piece for your bench pieces to sit, and that kind of makes nailing them in a little bit tricky. But what I like to do is I like to take some of my leftover smaller nails, and I use those to kind of nail them in first, just to give a little bit of extra stability for when I go in with my bigger nails. I'm just gonna nail them in with the smaller nails. And that just helps them stick down a little bit before you go in with your larger nail to really secure it in place. So all of my bench pieces are now nailed in, and we have one final part of the project, and that is to attach our sign. But before we attach it, we're actually going to add on the vinyl sign. And so you should have 3 cutout pieces that say "Don't feed the animals," and you can refer to your vinyl application card that comes in your kit to apply the vinyl onto your sign. And that is our sign all complete. Now we're ready to attach it to our table. So to attach your sign, you're gonna wanna pick a side of the table that you want your sign to be displayed on. I'm gonna pick this side. So I am going to take my table and I'm actually just gonna lay it flat down just so that I can line up exactly where I want my sign to go. And thankfully we do have this little middle piece that is our tabletop to help guide us to make sure our sign is nice and centered. And you wanna make sure the bottom pieces all line up to make a nice flat edge together. And just in case, I'm just gonna mark that off with my pencil just to make sure I have that nice and secure in case it ever moves around. So I am going to take one of my larger nails and nail this into place. So I have my first one, and I'm just gonna go diagonally down and put in my second nail. So here is our table all assembled. Now we get to the fun stuff, which is the decorating and the table setting. And for that, you're going to need all of your embellishments as well as your E6000 glue. So first, I'm going to glue down my tablecloth. Before I glue it down, I'm just gonna place it where I like. Make sure it's nice and snug. If you wanna trim off this little extra part that hangs off your table, you can do that, or you can let it dangle, or you can glue it down as well. But I'm gonna take my glue, gonna open it up. I'm just gonna glue down. You don't need a whole lot. A little goes a long way with the E6000. So I'm just gonna do a few dots on the edges and then a few in the middle, just to hold it down nice and snug. And that is my tablecloth all set. Now I'm gonna glue down my little centerpiece. Same principle where you just want to use a little bit of glue just to stick it down. You don't want any glue seeping out of the edges of any of your pieces. I'm gonna glue down my little flower vase on top of my centerpiece. Then I'm also gonna add a little bit of glue just on my little paper flowers so that they don't fly out of the vase, or they won't get stolen by any of our little animal friends. Push it down. Nice and snug. Now we just have our little plates to glue down. So I'm just gonna line them up exactly where I want them before I add the glue. And then very lastly, if you want to go ahead and take your sponge brush and your leftover paint and just kind of cover up any scuff marks or any marks that are left on our table from the assembly process. I have a few on my bench that I'm just going to cover up really quick. And before you're able to set this table outside, you want to make sure that the E6000 glue has a really good chance to dry. So I would recommend letting this sit and dry for 24 hours before you can place it outside. Well, here is our finished and set animal feeder. Thank you so much for following along with this tutorial. I hope you had a great time making it. If you did take a photo, we would love to see it. Tag us on Instagram at Pinovate and at DIY Delivery. Make sure to follow us while you're over there. We also have a Facebook. We are on Twitter and on Pinterest. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for more tutorials and check out our upcoming projects. Thank you very much. Bye.